Hello everybody, Lawrence Fleming here again. This is my, is it third day or fourth day? I don't remember which. Looking at the churches in the book of Revelation. And it dawned on me what God is having me do. There's 7 churches. There's 7 days at the Feast of Tabernacles. So I'm looking at a church a day. Clever of him to pick this time to do that. And it was clever of God to put the letters to the churches at the beginning, before the tribulation starts. He goes to each of the churches and tells them what he likes and what he doesn't like. Get your act together. We're into this now. Don't want to lose you guys. You've done a great job up to this point. Don't give up yet. And that's kind of the message that I've got for everybody. Don't give up yet. We don't know when the rapture is. And it's not on our time frame. It's not on our wish. It's on God's complete, full timeline. We don't know when the events are going to kick off. We're not supposed to. If we were supposed to, it'd be in there. Now, a lot of people are picking, well, if you add this day to this day and you count the number of years and it's got to be, now. Whatever your calculation is, I can give you a calculation that proves it isn't. Not that that's my goal. My goal is to prove to you that we're not going to know. We're not going to know because only the faithful will survive. Each one of these churches has had to deal with the environment, the people around them. They're in a hostile environment, in a hostile world, and yet they continue to work. The church in Ephesus was continuing to do their job, do their duty. But they forgot why they were doing it. Are you a church leader? Do you remember why you started being a church leader? Because you love Christ. But now you've been doing this for so long, for so many years. You're not doing it for God anymore. You're doing it because it's your duty. When we look at the other churches, we're going to see a similar scenario. Now, Smyrna was one that was, I didn't want to do it second because it's kind of a downer in one way. It's good in the end. But he's going to the people there and telling them, in a little while you're going to be in prison. Some of you are going to die. Coming from Jesus, that's probably not what you wanted to hear. But it was there. They didn't give up the love of Christ. They had the love of Christ. It's because of that that they couldn't survive. They were poor. Why were they poor? Because they couldn't make a living. The society that they lived in kept them off in the fringes. The Jews didn't want to have anything to do with them because they were becoming high profile to Rome, and they didn't want the synagogues kicked out. But Smyrna, it's interesting, all the introductions and everything have to do with what that particular church is about. The city was destroyed about 600 BC, and Alexander the Great had a dream. Dreams were big to them back then, telling him to rebuild the city. So he did, made a beautiful city out of it. Smyrna. It doesn't exist anymore. It's basically just the ruins. There is a Turkish town there. I forget what it's called, Ishtar or something like that. But they were dead, and then they were resurrected. We'll see where that comes in here in a little bit. I'm back down here at my my lake. I still had some time. I got my running around today that I needed to. So tomorrow I just have to pack up and go. And I'm going to be back closer to where I've been before. Now I got to find out from God which church He wants me to go to. I think for tomorrow night I will go to the church that I've been going to. But then I'm moving again after 4 days, so where's He going to take me? I don't know yet. But Smyrna, another seaport just north of Ephesus. If you were to go due west from Smyrna, you'd end up in Athens. Pretty quick trade route. And what do they trade there? Something very valuable. They were known as the port to get myrrh. Remember the 3 wise guys? That was one of their gifts. I wonder if they got it from Smyrna. Could have. Because that was what they were known for. They were known for dealing with death. And then that's what Jesus tells the people there that they're going to have to deal with. Imprisonment and death. They were familiar with it. But because their works were because of the love of Jesus, not because they had to, they were willing to go through that. Most of these churches that were in the Roman area had a problem. Now the Jews in their synagogues, they had some kind of a deal with Rome that they didn't have to go through everything that everybody else did. And they were being threatened because the Christians that were part of them were beginning to take some of that down. Rome was beginning to look down at the synagogues. So they kicked out the Christians out of the synagogues. But one of the things that they had to do, and it's one of the reasons that they were poor, is they came into the marketplace through a little small gate, a little tent at the entrance. And everyone that went in grabbed some incense, threw it on the fire, and said their praises to Caesar or to whoever was in charge. They had to commit themselves to that, not to Jesus. In fact, if you said it to Jesus, they would probably kill you on the spot, but a lot of them just refused to talk. So they were turned away. Some of them found ways to sneak in, but most of them didn't. And just like we're going to find here in our times, you're going to be denied access if you don't throw your allegiance behind the Antichrist and get the mark. It's almost the same thing going on again. It's in our future. We're not there yet. The Antichrist is most certainly alive, but he's not in the forefront. Hitler, the biggest little a Antichrist, was an unknown person before God gave him over to Satan, and Satan used him as a little a Antichrist. He did some horrible things under that control. The Antichrist is going to do some horrible things under his control. He's going to be so powerful that the only one that can take him down is God, and he will. All right, let's sit down and look at Smyrna. Do our Bible study here. One thing that I typically don't read is I don't read the headings above these chapters. Sometimes they're covered in the chapter and you don't need to read them, but it's an interesting way of looking at these churches. For Ephesus, the heading was the loveless church. They had lost their first love. For Smyrna, they're the persecuted church. They had the most persecution of all the churches. We read about Pergamos, the compromising church, bringing in the outside in and corrupting their work. Speaking of corrupting, the Thyatira church, its heading is the corrupt church. And Sardis, the dead church. Philadelphia, the only really good church in this group, the faithful church. And then finally, the Laodiceans, the lukewarm church. Each one of these titles are titles that we can all have a part of. They're warnings. Clean up your act. Get your act together. Things are about to get bad, and we want you to be prepared. If you do these things that I ask you to do, you will sail right on through. If you don't, you may die on the vine right there. So we're going to read about the persecuted church. Revelation 2:8. And to the angel of the church of Smyrna write, these things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life. Remember the story about the city of Smyrna was dead and came back to life because of Alexander the Great? That's what he was referring to. He gives a personal intro to every one of these letters that the people there would understand. I know your works. I know the tribulation and the poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. The synagogues there were like Ephesus. They had let the world in, and they'd worked out agreements with the authorities so that they could continue doing their thing and not be subject to the same rules of everybody else. They did that because they were compromising their behavior. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison. Don't look at a modern U.S. prison. We've been very blessed here in this country. Up until recently, we're going to be paying a price for it, but Christians around the world have suffered where we've been managed to hang on and keep some dignity in what we're doing. The rest of the world, they throw people in prison real quick and easy. Back then, they would have been rat infested, little to no food, no hour of day of going outside and playing basketball. You just lie there in a vegetative state because there's really nothing you can do. So God, through Jesus, says, do not fear any of these things which you're about to suffer. The devil will throw you into prison, and you may be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days, as in most biblical numbers. They're a metaphor. 6 days for creation, a metaphor. 1,000 years is probably a metaphor, but it might be. Sometimes God will play with numbers and it will be a metaphor. 1,000 years was basically an eternity to the early people of the church. But it can also mean literally 1,000 years. That's kind of where God likes to show how well he's planned this. Any phrase can have multiple meanings. You will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death. That's encouraging. And I will give you the crown of life. Again, a metaphor for the people of Smyrna. Up on top of the hill, the palace up there is kind of in the shape of a crown. People would go to these events and get crowns. You'd compete in events and get crowns. Crowns were your achievement. Now, these Christians were never going to get any of those crowns because they were pushed off to the side. They were marginalized. But God's going to give them a crown of life. We are going to get a crown of life. Stay to the end. Don't give up. Don't lose your faith. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death. We will miss the second death. We're going to trade it in for eternal life. These churches are examples of churches and people today. It applied to them back then. A lot of the stuff was very meaningful and literal to them. Some of us don't even know the persecution that these people went through. We're starting to see some of it. When God set up this country, He gave us a protection, a constitution. It's going to be torn down. It's going to be burned. And the people here are going to be suffering because of it. We're probably going to be out of here before that happens, but if not, listen to what Jesus says to these churches. Be strong. Don't lose faith. Stay with it till the end, and you will get a crown of life. As Christians, we have the Bema seat coming. We will be rewarded in heaven for the things that we do here. Most people on this planet do things for earthly gain. A new car, a new house, more money in the bank account. If we do things for heavenly things, we won't be upset when this world is destroyed. Because when it is, we will be in heaven. Well, so this is 1, 2, 3 churches, plus my little introduction, I think, but 3 churches. I've got 4 to go. Thyatira will be my next one. And these are all in the same general area. I wonder why God picked all these, but they were ones that Paul would work with, and John, the bishop of Ephesus. These are areas where they have gone to the Gentiles and were able to build their churches within Satan's throne, as we saw in one of the other ones. They've been able to survive, get the word out, and give people there a chance. And they're all in the same area. If you had one church in one country and another church in another country, then the countries would say, well, my church is better than yours, or we didn't sin as bad as yours. Putting them all together in one, there's no rivalry from this. They're all dealing with something. One of them is a dead church. We definitely don't want to be in that, Sardis. And the Laodiceans, the lukewarm church, and it's where we find what lukewarm does to God. It makes him sick. But we still have Philadelphia coming up. Wouldn't it be great if all of our churches fit in that mold? Okay, as we keep watching, what can we do? Stay busy. The worst thing you can do is sit down and either give up or just simply rest. Take rest when you need it, but get back up. People don't lie down to go to sleep, to stay in bed the rest of their lives. They lie down to rest, and then they get back up afresh in the morning. You can sit down for that long. You can rest, but get back to work. There's plenty that we still have to do. All the churches that got a failing grade, they may have pleased God in one way, but if they got a failing remark, then they got work to do. Repent. Change whatever God told you you're doing wrong. Change it. There's work for all of us. If your church is not doing what they're supposed to do, talk to the people in authority. If they're not willing to hear you, you know where the door is. If they're willing to hear you and they're willing to ask you to help, be quick to step in. God will help you to do whatever needs to be done. Because when this gets over with here, after the letters of the churches, we get to see heaven, the throne room of heaven. We've already seen Jesus in his glory. We get to see the throne room of heaven. Then we get to see what the scroll does. In chapter 6 is where it gets real. I don't know if I'm going to have a time to do that. We'll see. Everybody who's been thinking that the rapture is in these times that we're in, some of it's want, but we see the parallel. We know the direction we're going. We know that we have to get through this before the chapter 6 takes over. And we'll be out of here by that time because the first writer is the Antichrist. If he were to come down here today and we're still here, he couldn't get to first base. We'd recognize him. We'd start praying against him. And God gives us our prayers if we do it sincerely. So he couldn't work. That's why God's not putting us into that position. We'll get out of here before the Antichrist starts doing what he's going to do. The rest of the world will see him. They won't recognize him. They'll be amazed. And ultimately, they will all follow him. The only hope the world has is in the remaining Christians that are here until the end. 144,000. One thing that God always does is he passes on the mantle. The Elisha story is a good example. Elijah says, "What can I do for you before I leave?" And Elisha says, "I want a double portion of what you've got." He already knew he was going to take over, but he wanted a double portion. That's the firstborn portion. Elijah goes, "I don't know if I can do that, but if you see me ascend, then it will happen." And he saw him ascend in a chariot of fire. Might make a good movie. Then his mantle from Elijah fell to the earth for Elisha to have. Because he went up fully clothed. He got to ride in a chariot. But that's what we're going to do. When we go in the rapture, we're leaving the next set of missionaries, if you will, behind the 144,000. Their job is to take that mantle and get out and get to all the Jews in the world. And then God will send angels to the rest of the world so that the whole world will know and have a chance to make a choice. So do a good job so you can pass your mantle off to somebody and say, "I've already got this set up for you. Here you go. Just step in and harvest." We've been planting seeds. All right. Till we meet in the clouds. Hopefully soon. God bless.